Can you imagine living in a place where the sun disappears for 2 whole months, and when it returns, never sets? A place that carries stories so dark they seem straight out of a horror movie, with abandonment, mysterious deaths, and endless suffering. And what about an island that is home to the largest concentration of polar bears in the world? Only instead of burrows in the snow, they occupy abandoned houses with roofs and windows. Welcome to WRANGEL Island. Here, ice not only reigns, it dominates everything. Life on this remote piece of Earth takes place in a setting so brutal and surreal that it seems from another planet. Are you ready to discover what it's like to live in one of the most inhospitable and frightening regions in the world? Get ready, because Bello Mundo will take you to a place that challenges everything you think you know about survival. Number 1. Location and geographical data. Hidden about 500 kilometers north of the Arctic Circle, WRANGEL Island is a true remote treasure in the icy Chukchi Sea. Its atmosphere is as inhospitable as it is intriguing, a combination that piques the curiosity of any adventurer. For those who don't know it yet, this barren and windy piece of land rests in the Arctic Ocean, just above eastern Siberia, right between the Chukchi Sea and the East Siberian Sea. If you try to imagine the point where the vast Arctic meets the edge of Russia, you're almost there. At approximately 7,600 square kilometers, the island is accompanied by a more modest sister, Herald Island. Together, they form a rare and precious ecosystem, home to unique wildlife. The climate is freezing, and that's just the beginning. The winter there is brutal, with temperatures that can make anyone doubt their sanity. The lowest temperature ever recorded was -57 degrees Celsius, while on a rare warm day, the temperature can reach -18 degrees. As in other polar places, the island faces the extremes of polar day and polar night. During the summer, the days seem to never end, with almost 24 hours of sunlight. But winter brings a very different reality: the polar night. With only a few hours of light a day, darkness dominates much of the time. And when it comes to extreme conditions, WRANGEL Island is no joke. It receives less annual precipitation than some hot deserts, and to top it off, snowstorms with winds reaching speeds of between 120 and 140 kilometers per hour are common. To give you an idea, even on Everest, hurricane-force winds rarely exceed 200 kilometers per hour. It's the force of pure nature, but don't be fooled. And don't go thinking that because it's far away and cold, it's forgotten. On the contrary, its arid landscape has already captured the attention of brave explorers and great geopolitical powers, challenging anyone who dared to unravel it. Number 2. History. The fascination with this remote frozen land began with Baron Ferdinand Petrovich Wrangel, a determined Russian explorer of the 19th century. He heard rumors from indigenous sailors about a large landmass north of Siberia and, driven by curiosity and ambition, undertook expeditions to the Arctic. Ironically, despite his tireless efforts, Wrangel never set foot on the island that today bears his name. Recognition of the place came in 1867, when the American whaler Thomas Long spotted the mysterious land and decided to honor the Baron with his name. Curiously, the British already had another name for the place, Kellet Land, in tribute to Captain Sir Henry Kellet, who sighted it years before, in 1849. At the beginning of the 20th century, Russia, seeking to assert its presence in the Arctic, began to map and explore this inhospitable region, turning it into a strategic point for those who dared to challenge its extremes. In 911, the Russian icebreakers Tamir and Vaygach landed there as part of the Arctic Ocean Hydrographic Expedition, officially claiming it for the Russian Empire. This remote island, however, soon became the scene of one of the most tragic chapters in Arctic exploration. In 1913, the Canadian Arctic expedition, led by Vilhjalmur Stephenson, set off in search of conquests and discoveries. But the mission soon turned into a nightmare when the ship Karluk became trapped in the ice, adrift and isolated. In a controversial act, Stephenson left the group with a promise to seek help, but never returned. The survivors, under the leadership of Captain Robert Bartlett, had to face one of the cruelest winters of their lives. They improvised shelters, fought the cold, and desperately searched for ways to survive, but many didn't make it. Stephenson's abandonment remains to this day one of the most controversial episodes in the history of polar exploration. But Stephenson's obsession with the island didn't end there. In 1921, he organized another attempt at occupation, this time with a small group that included Ada Blackjack, a young Inuit woman. She accepted the dangerous mission as a seamstress, believing it would improve her life. However, the reality was cruel. Lack of food, disease, and isolation took their toll on her companions, leaving Ada as the only survivor. For almost 2 years, she fought against the elements, hunting to survive and becoming a symbol of courage and resilience. In 1923, another group of Inuits was sent to the site, but history changed 3 years later when Russia regained control, removing the inhabitants and consolidating its rule. Since then, this icy land has become a point of geopolitical dispute, a symbol of resistance and ambition, whose scenario of tension between Russia and the United States remains to this day, intensified by contemporary global challenges. Number 3. Russia or the United States? Whose island? And whose island is Wrangel anyway? Have you ever heard the saying, "A dog with many owners goes hungry"? Well, it makes perfect sense here. On the one hand, we have Russia asserting its control. On the other, the United States disagrees, turning this frozen island into the stage for a power play that spans generations. It all began in 1881, when Captain Calvin Hooper of the U.S. Revenue Cutter Service landed on Wrangel Island and proudly raised the American flag. At the time, he was practically the governor of Alaska, which the United States had bought from Russia 14 years earlier. For Moscow, however, the American presence was never recognized. They always considered Wrangel to be part of Chukotka, an autonomous territory. And as geopolitics never stand still, recent tensions, such as the invasion of Ukraine, have once again brought issues of territorial control to the fore. The Americans have detailed records to back up their claims over Wrangel and the neighboring Delong Islands. In 1921, a group of American colonists settled on the island. 3 years later, however, the Soviet gunboat Red October invaded, capturing the settlers, many of whom did not survive their captivity. Russian interest in the island began to gain momentum at the time of the Bolshevik Revolution. In 1911, Russia declared the discovery of Wrangel, and 5 years later, formalized its claims. The United States, which would only establish diplomatic relations with Russia in 1933, never formally recognized these claims. Over time, Wrangel Island continued to be a matter of dispute. During the Second World War, the U.S. Congress even discussed the possibility of establishing an air base on the island. However, the attack on Pearl Harbor changed priorities, and the idea was shelved. In 1991, during negotiations with Russia after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, U.S. senators expressed concern about maintaining claims on the region. Today, Wrangel remains a sensitive point of tension. Its strategic position, close to the northern maritime route, offers Russia the possibility of influencing liquefied natural gas exports from the United States to Asia. Control over this route could be crucial in geopolitical terms. To make matters more intricate, the Maritime Boundary Agreement of 1990 between the United States and the Soviet Union did not include Wrangel or other nearby islands in the discussions, perpetuating the diplomatic impasse. Moscow reinforced its sovereignty over the island, while the United States maintained a cautious stance, avoiding an open dispute. Decades have passed, but the dispute continues. Wrangel Island, solitary and surrounded by ice, remains a symbol of disputes that, it seems, no one wants to or can resolve definitively. And speaking of other islands in the region, we find right in the middle of this icy and historic landscape the enigmatic Diomedes Islands, yet another scene of tension between Russia and the United States. Separated by just over 3 kilometers of frozen sea, what really sets them apart is something that transcends space: time. Crossing from one island to the other is like traveling back in time. On one, you're in the past, on the other, in the future. Surreal? Of course. It's the kind of mystery that hooks anyone. And if you're intrigued, be sure to check out our special video on Diomedes Islands, the island where you can see the future, after this one. Number 4. Nature Reserve, UNESCO Heritage. Leaving aside man's courageous but disastrous attempts to conquer and map the Arctic desert, as well as the geopolitical obstacles. Moving on, let's now talk about the stunning natural beauty of Wrangel Island, a veritable paradise of biodiversity in the midst of extreme cold. No wonder that in 2004, the UNESCO World Heritage Committee recognized this by including the island in its list of global ecological hotspots, highlighting it as a unique island ecosystem with the greatest biodiversity in the high Arctic. The island is literally the birthplace of polar bears, but they're not the only important inhabitants. Bearded seals, ringed seals, and large walrus colonies also find refuge here. Far from the icy seas, small rodents, such as collared lemmings and Siberian lemmings, sustain the terrestrial food chain. They are a walking feast for the Arctic foxes, gluttons, and wolves that patrol their territory with cunning and resilience. And if the underwater world around the island looks spectacular, the coastal waters don't disappoint. They are inhabited by majestic cetaceans such as Greenland whales, migrating gray whales, and the fascinating belugas. But the natural spectacle doesn't end there. Wrangel, along with its neighbor Herald Island, has been designated an important bird area. The island is a birdwatcher's paradise, with breeding colonies of white-fronted geese, ruddy geese, and snow geese. Even snowy owls are attracted here, skillfully hunting the lemmings that dig tunnels under the snow. Gulls of various species, including Ross gull, Sabine gull, and ivory gull, lend a vibrant touch to the icy skies. For naturalists, ecologists, archaeologists, and even twitchers, enthusiasts who travel long distances to observe rare birds, Wrangel Island is a dream destination. Every year, a small group of adventurers embark on journeys to this inhospitable land, seeking to witness up close the grandeur and mystery that make this island so special. Number 5. Woolly Mammoth. And speaking of animals, remember the movie Ice Age with the imposing mammoth Manny? Well, he was a woolly mammoth, and Wrangel Island was the last home of this magnificent species. While most woolly mammoths disappeared from the earth around 10,000 years ago, the Wrangel mammoths managed to stand the test of time and survived until around 4,000 years ago. This incredible feat was only possible thanks to the island's isolation, which kept them away from predators and drastic environmental changes that affected the rest of the planet. Recent studies on the remains of these giants have revealed fascinating secrets. They developed specific genetic adaptations to survive the extreme Arctic environment. Unfortunately, the small size of the population brought a major challenge. Genetic problems began to emerge, contributing to the final decline of the species on the island. But, leaving mammoths aside and returning to the present, if there's one thing that makes Wrangel really famous today, it's the impressive density of polar bears. Number 6. Polar bears. As we've already mentioned, Wrangel Island is much more than a refuge. It's the nursery of polar bears, with the highest concentration of maternity dens in the world. When the ice begins to melt, these magnificent predators gather on the island's beaches, where they rest and hunt, taking advantage of every moment to feed and regain their strength after long periods of scarcity. But the real magic happens when the bears create their dens. The polar bear's ability to build shelters on Wrangel Island is nothing short of impressive. They dig deep holes in the snow or find naturally protected spaces to give birth and protect their cubs from the extreme conditions of the Arctic, such as the biting winds and possible predators. These safe environments ensure that new generations have a chance to grow and thrive, even in such a challenging climate. But perhaps what is most striking is how some of these bears have begun to occupy abandoned human buildings. Number 7. Bears that live in houses. You may remember one of the most striking viral phenomena of 2022. The images of polar bears inhabiting abandoned buildings circulated all over the internet. And yes, these photos are real, the result of an unexpected discovery during an expedition to Wrangel Island, which has become a symbol of the complex interaction between wildlife and human remains. It all started with a wildlife photography enthusiast who traveled to this remote region in the Russian Arctic. He dreamed of capturing images of polar bears in their natural habitat, and his destination was the island's famous nature reserve and its large maternity hospital. However, he wasn't just surprised by the creatures, but by where they were. During his journey, he came across a surreal scene in an abandoned weather station. There, a group of bears were exploring the ruins, curiously appearing at the windows, as if they were legitimate inhabitants of the space. Instead of approaching directly, he used a drone to capture images that quickly spread around the world, showing the imposing bears occupying the almost ruined buildings. But why would the bears be there? What in fact is the reason behind this change of address? According to experts, their choice to take shelter in human buildings could be a sign of the threats they face. Although hunting is banned in Russia, illegal hunters still pose a constant danger. In these circumstances, bears seek protection by hiding in places that offer shelter from the sound of engines or any noise they might associate with a threat. Despite the ban on hunting in Russia, illegal hunters still pose a real danger. According to the Russian branch of the International Fund for Animal Welfare, known by the acronym IFOBIO, up to 200 polar bears die in Russia at the hands of illegal hunters every year. By hiding in human buildings, the bears are trying to protect themselves from threats, an adaptation that says a lot about the challenges they face. For scientists, this interaction between bears and abandoned structures reveals more than curiosity or adaptation. It reflects the struggle for survival in a world where the pressure on these animals' natural habitat is constantly increasing. And so ends our journey through the fascinating world of Wrangel Island. Which parts surprised you the most? Was it the story of the bears occupying abandoned houses, or the fact that woolly mammoths roamed these lands until relatively recently? Share your impressions with us in the comments. If you're a fan of exploring mysterious places and stories that defy reality, stick with us. There's still a lot to discover together in this Bello Mundo. For those of you who have followed us this far, thank you very much and see you next time.